Hill, thank you. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's a member of the Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committees. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. You heard the president today. It looks like he's not budging, at least not yet. Do you see any way out of this shutdown, at least at this point?
Well, Wolf, I'm not encouraged by what I just heard. I'll remind you that 2 weeks ago, the United States Senate unanimously passed a funding bill because Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had heard from the White House that President Trump would sign it. He then changed his mind and less than the next day reversed position and said he would only sign a funding bill if it had full funding for his $5 billion for border wall. That's where we stand now a dozen days later. And Mitch McConnell will not bring to the floor the path forward that I believe House Democrats will pass tomorrow because he still doesn't know what President Trump will accept. This is a shutdown without a purpose. This is a shutdown that is senseless. And I frankly think it is not only hurting 800,000 federal employees across the country, it's hurting our reputation as a democracy around the world. 800,000
federal employees and their families, we should add as well. The president wants congressional leaders to come back on Friday. Do you think anything is really going to change over the next couple days?
Well, Wolf, I think it's positive that they're meeting in person. That's more likely to produce some sort of breakthrough than staying at opposite ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. But the Senate and the House have already presented President Trump with two different paths out of this. He simply needs to say yes to one of them.
The president, do you think the president is serious when he says he'll wait as long as it takes, his words, as long as it takes to get his border wall funding?
I certainly hope not. He did tweet this morning that Mexico is paying for the wall, something that's puzzling because he's citing a new trade deal that hasn't even been considered by Congress as the mechanism by which he somehow thinks that Mexico is paying for this. Frankly, Wolf, out of a $3 trillion budget to have the entire 7 different entire departments of the U.S. government shut down over a $5 billion disagreement strikes me as an embarrassing impasse in Washington. We funded $1.3 billion last fiscal year in border security, and that hasn't been fully spent yet. I joined with the majority of the Senate in supporting $1.3 billion in border security this year. I think the president should accept that deal and we should move forward.
Yeah, it was also surprising in that same tweet that you referenced when he said Mexico is already paying for the wall, which they're not. Much of the wall, he says, has already been fully renovated or built. And so the question immediately emerges, if much of the wall has already been renovated or built, why do you need so much more money if it's already been done, if the project has already been done? So that's, he didn't explain exactly what he meant there. The president also says, Senator, that Democrats want to keep spending money on foreign aid and that he just wants a fraction of that for funding a border wall. He says tens of billions of dollars going to countries that don't do anything for the United States. He simply wants $5.6 billion to protect the security of the United States along the border with Mexico. What's your response?
Well, I've worked in a bipartisan way with Republicans in the Congress over the last 2 sessions to protect needed funding for foreign aid programs that contribute to our security, to health, and to prosperity in the developing world. The majority of our foreign aid goes to just 5 countries, and these are countries that are critical security partners for the United States, whether it's Israel, Iraq, Afghanistan, or for humanitarian relief in Syria. I do think that we've made important strides in recent years in making our foreign assistance more transparent, more efficient, and more accountable. That's something I work closely with former Republican chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Corker, on. And I don't think that this is an apples to orange comparison. We have voted for more border security investments. What I don't support is billions of dollars for a concrete wall in the desert between Texas and Arizona and California and Mexico. And frankly, neither do many of the folks who represent those districts or those states.
The president made several false or wild claims today during the 2-hour cabinet meeting, which was all on camera. Among other things, he says he fired the defense secretary, James Mattis. He claims Mexico, once again, is already paying for the border wall. It's not. And he clearly overstates the number of illegal immigrants here in the United States. He says more than 30 million are here, and that number is seen as wildly exaggerated. Can lawmakers, Senator, negotiate with someone who doesn't seem to have a grasp on all these relevant facts?
Well, one of the difficulties of negotiating with President Trump is both his grasp of recent developments and facts and his willingness to take a position and then stick to it. As you know, last year, a bipartisan compromise on immigration and investment in border security was presented to the president. He accepted it, said this is terrific, a great resolution, let's move forward. And then 48 hours later, abandoned that compromise position and actively mobilized against it. That's why it's been frustrating, difficult to try and reach a resolution on some of these divisive issues that relate to trade, to national security, to immigration. One thing I'll say is a positive. The president announced an abrupt withdrawal of American troops from Syria just a few weeks ago, which led to Secretary Mattis, a decorated, seasoned senior Marine Corps general, to resign in protest from his position as Secretary of Defense. President Trump has now backed off and said that he will have that be a slower withdrawal of our troops over 4 months. That will be less disruptive. I still think it's a bad decision, but to spread it out over 4 months is an improvement and will make less harm to our security position in Syria.
Finally, Senator, the president's cabinet right now, he did have a full-scale cabinet meeting today. Look at this. It's filled with a whole bunch of temporary placeholders at the Attorney General, Acting Attorney General, Defense Secretary, Acting EPA Administrator, UN Ambassador, White House Chief of Staff, Interior Secretary, OMB, Director, Office of Management and Budget. Does it concern you?
Yes, I'm particularly concerned that the acting Attorney General, Matthew Whitaker, is someone who should not be in that position. The president jumped over the Department of Justice succession statute. Rod Rosenstein should be the acting Attorney General, and we ought to promptly be holding hearings on the nominee to be the next Attorney General. To have 7 different important cabinet posts, including Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, and Chief of Staff, filled by acting positions who haven't been subject to scrutiny or confirmation by the United States Senate is a very concerning development and suggests that there really is a lack of professionalism and focus at the highest levels of the administration.
Senator Coons, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Up next, we have more breaking news.